This video is possible thanks to contributions to the Existence University Patreon by viewers like you. Thank you. I recently received this question by a friend and one of the first followers of this channel. And by recently, I mean on Halloween 5 months ago. My exploration into the answer to that question has taken me on a wild adventure that I would like to now share with the rest of you. He asked, "What is your opinion on the probability approaching 1 as time goes on that every online talking head intellectual suddenly discovering they have ADHD and abusing stimulants? Your article is talking about a conceptual problem, and these people self-profess that their brains do not function to the degree they want it to without pharmaceutical interventions. I just find it weird that anyone with a large follower count has sudden onset ADHD. Did becoming popular give them focusing problems? I'm just pointing out how these people with an anti-conceptual mentality find relief in stimulant usage. What is locked away in their brains that they think that they can get from stimulant usage?" The answer, in 3 parts. Part 1, the wrong answer. Part 2, the blurry answer. And Part 3, the correct answer. Too long, didn't watch. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental difference in a subset of the general population, and one's anti-conceptual mindset is not caused by ADHD, nor does it have an impact on whether one has ADHD. First, let's break the question down into parts. 1. What are the odds internet personalities will discover they have ADHD or some sort of neurodiversity? 2. What are the odds that they then abuse stimulants? 3. Did popularity give them ADHD? Part 1. The wrong answer. My initial answer was, "What?" Followed by, quote, "Oh yeah, ADHD is essentially not a thing, and people all get there by some anti-conceptual mentality. I haven't considered ADHD in particular, but certainly it's more trendy than neurological." End quote. This answer is so wrong. It is embarrassingly wrong, and I am only exposing my terrible private answer, which was already corrected in that private conversation, because of the value of the lesson learned from the journey which followed. I told him I didn't really quite know, and I would come back to him on that. He always has killer questions. Now allow me to explain why I had such a bad opinion on this topic. And the fact of the matter is, my bad opinion came from my degree in neuropsychology. When I got my degree in psychology, autism and ADHD were still quite mysterious. Take, for example, this reading from one of my psychology textbooks on ADHD, which, first and foremost, was calling it attention deficit disorder, ADD, and so the entry on ADHD specifically only read, "ADHD is characterized by a deficit in motor system inhibition." Otherwise, the ADD section states, quote, "ADD is probably the most talked about and the most controversial. Completely unheard of until recently, ADD has become a regular focus of media attention and has been at the center of many debates about social policies involving caretakers, healthcare providers, and educators. This exposure is well deserved. The diagnostic features of ADD include a deficit of attention, inattention distractibility, impulsivity, memory, and in some cases, hyperactivity. Children with ADD often score badly on a wide variety of neuropsychological tests, but this does not necessarily mean that they have some sort of general impairment. As with many neuropsychological disorders, the best treatment for ADD appears to be a combination of pharmaceutical, educational, and environmental interventions." In regard to autism, the textbook is just seemingly baffled by it, at one point writing, quote, "What causes autism? there is fairly convincing evidence that at least one form of autism can be inherited. In the general population, 0.1% of children are autistic. The siblings of autistic children have a 3% chance of sharing the disorder. Similarly, autism concordance is 300 times higher in monozygotic twins than in dizygotic twins. But the penetrance of the disorder is not 100% in monozygotic twins. Therefore, genetics cannot be the only factor in the development of autism, or every form of autism. Some researchers suspect that autism is caused by prenatal exposure to toxins, or even that the disorder is caused by a virus. These suspicions are not completely unwarranted. For instance, if a pregnant woman suffers from rubella during the first trimester of pregnancy, this significantly increases the odds that the child will exhibit autism. There is even debate about whether the mumps, measles, and rubella vaccine that is regularly given to North American children puts them at greater risk of developing autism. However, the evidence for this link is not yet clear." End quote. So this is the basis of my wrong answer. My degree in psychology, which is a very sad revelation. There was so little information on the topic when I was in school. All there was speculations. That, and some psychologists love to blame genetics to downplay the role of free will, blaming addiction, abuse, and being a jerk or whatever on some genetic component. Even though those same addicts tended to have pretty bad lives, including having a poor education, poor or abusive social lives, and bad conceptual mentalities. And when you take them out of that and replace bad ideas for good ideas, they can get clean. So was it genetic or environmental, or both? This was the initial mindset I had about neurodiversity. Part 2. The blurry answer. As I have a degree in psychology, I tend to find that if you want to learn about a psychological issue, you have to ask the person experiencing it. So I turned to YouTube, and I started to explore the topic by those that had it. At first, I would only listen to people that stated that they had a professional diagnosis, thinking that a self-diagnosis was essentially the proof that they were just joining the trend. When I started this journey, I obviously decided to use myself as a control group, as I am, or I thought I was, neurotypical, and because, to the best of my knowledge, I have a proper objective conceptual mindset. When I watched the videos on ADHD and autism, there was no indication of the person's philosophical ideas, and for the most part, there was nothing in their opinions which gave any red flags that they were being anti-conceptual. There were people with ADHD and autism with anti-conceptual mentalities, but of those who specifically address what autism or ADHD is like, it was never anything a psychologist or philosopher would be able to call them out on. The only thing that was really bothering me was that their descriptions of what it was like to have ADHD or autism was identical to my life, and I was still holding myself as neurotypical, so this was the logical deduction. Premise: X is the experience of an autistic person. Premise: X is the experience of mine. Conclusion: X is a shared experience between me and the autistic people. Premise: X is a shared experience between me and autistic people. Premise: I am neurotypical. Conclusion: They are neurotypical and just attention-seeking. There is a big problem with that logic, especially since I have never been diagnosed as neurotypical. They had been diagnosed as autistic or having ADHD. I probed and prodded them to be more explicit and clarify what it was that made me different from them if I was reporting that we were different. But nothing made the distinction any clearer. So in my eyes, people with autism were unable to explain it, which was clear justification that they were faking it. I was not sure what caused these neurological disorders, but I was not yet unconvinced by toxins or vaccines, nor was I yet unconvinced that it was all just made up and mixed with some mentally disabled children. It was clearly something, but what it was I did not yet know. In this phase, here are some things I learned about autism and ADHD. 1. It is a neurological difference. It is a thing, a real physically detectable thing. The brain is either over-connecting neurons or under-pruning, usually a combination of the two. Autistic people tend to have a special interest, which they can spend most of their time working on in a day such that they forget to eat. Likewise, ADHD people can have special interests, but they also have hyperfixations, which are like special interests, but they are fleeting. 3. There does appear to be a trend growing of YouTubers discovering that they are neurodivergent. 4. There is a term for the inability to communicate between neurotypical people, denoted now NT, and neurodiverse people, denoted ND, called the double empathy problem. The double empathy problem states that because the neurology of NTs and NDs is different, how they experience the world is different, and how they communicate is different. And so there is this double divide where the NTs don't know what it's like to be ND, and NDs don't know what it's like to be NT, and they struggle to empathize with each other. However, NDs are perfectly capable of empathizing with other NDs, just as NTs are able to empathize with other NTs. I thought maybe that I was unable to understand them because of the double empathy problem, but knowing that bias, and using my psych degree to try to bypass the bias by noticing when it appears, and listening to them more thoroughly, and less of my response to it. If you've been paying attention, this was not my issue, as still they were just saying things I understood. In doing research and seeking help from others, it was eventually pointed out to me that I should watch one video on autism and rejection sensitivity dysphoria, denoted RSD. Honestly, after that video, I realized that I had autism. It was also pointed out to me that I also have ADHD. My world suddenly made a lot more sense. Part 3. The correct answer. When I realized that I was neurodiverse, suddenly my jokes about myself stopped being jokes. Like when I misspell or misread something, and I blame my dyslexia. No, I actually just have dyslexia. My inability to instantly read a clock or do basic arithmetic, despite having achieved the requirements for a minor in mathematics, was actually dyscalculia. And yes, I did misspell that. And I also misspelled misspell the first 2 times I wrote it. Things started to make sense. Like, why is it so hard for me to make YouTube videos? First, just the ADHD time blindness and autistic fatigue in life that prevents me from getting to be able to do multiple tasks in one day. So if I'm working a day job, videos are basically over. However, I tend to quit or get fired from jobs due to my neurodiversity in one way or another. So I will work independently for the most part, which has its own sets of barriers that I just cannot do for absolutely no reason, which apparently is called executive functioning issues. So sometimes, even when I have the time and energy and ideas of what to write and create for my channel, I will just sit staring at my screen until it's emotionally too much, in which case it's time for a break of scrolling through YouTube videos, watching maybe 0.5% of all the video thumbnails I see. This also made me realize something rather strange. Neurotypical people do not talk about being neurotypical. Neurotypical people are the statistical average. They do not question if they are weird because they are statistically normal. For this reason, neurotypical people do not make videos like, quote, a day in the life of a normal person, end quote, which honestly would be so helpful to people like me. The moment I realized I must be autistic, I turned to YouTube, looking for, what's it like to be normal? And there's nothing. In fact, the more I continued my research on this topic, I started to wonder if NTs are NPCs. For example, a Medium parody article written by which describes neurotypical people in the same way in which neurodiverse people are typically described. Here is the parody DSM criteria. A. Rigid, repetitive patterns of social interaction and comprehension as manifest by the following. 1. Pervasive obsession with social banter, interpersonal drama and politics, playing the game, fitting in with a specific social group, and/or social hierarchy. 2. Tendency to partake in herd mentality and behavior, tendency to be easily influenced by their peers, and to conform unquestioningly to societal expectations. Subsequent defects in the cultivation of special interests, and/or exploration of innovation, novel thoughts, and feelings. 3. Difficulty engaging with or seeing meaning in activities, thought processes, or forms of interpersonal engagement that reflect individuality and personal creativity, unless they are widely adopted by one's peers. 4. Inflexible adherence to social norms or ritualized patterns of verbal or nonverbal behavior prescribed by society, e.g., greeting rituals, gestures, and phrases. Disorientation and social withdrawal when those rituals and norms do not occur. 5. Failure to comprehend or visualize identities that are not deemed normative. Tendency to fear or shun other people whose behaviors are not deemed normative or predictable. 6. Deficits in ability to understand or exhibit nonverbal communicative behaviors that are outside the narrow range of what is prescribed by mainstream societal expectations. 7. Tendency to pigeonhole, stereotype, and categorize others based on such things as job/career, age, gender, income, hobbies/interests, sexual preferences, living situation, social affect, vocal intonation, emotional expression, and physical appearance. 8. Rigid adherence to unspoken, implicit expectations. Emotional withdrawal when those expectations are not met. 9. Tendency to use language to say one thing but mean something else, e.g., asking a question such as, "How are you doing?" but not wanting an honest answer. And B. Persistent deficits in depth of situational and contextual awareness, sensory perception or interests as manifest by at least 3 of the following. 1. Highly predictable, restricted interests, e.g., career, normative activities, social rules, gossip, prescriptive banter. 2. Fixated linear thinking, impaired ability to comprehend or explore non-linear, circular, tangential, aimless, expansive, or other dynamic thought processes. Deficits in ability to access bursts of creative passion, emotional intensity, and absorptive hyperfocus. 3. Immediate and rigid opinions on various topics and subjects without observable curiosity or motivation for in-depth research. 4. Inability to be aware of all aspects of one's sensory environment simultaneously, with subsequent tendency to, for example, socialize in loud places with numerous competing sensory inputs. See A2. 5. Diminished attention to detail, e.g., lack of awareness of such things as landscape, sky/lighting, background noises, ambient smells, personal space, or subtle changes in the environment. 6. Inability to get absorbed in a task or activity fully, deficits in depth of experience. 7. Diminished capacity for arranging information, systematizing, and seeing patterns in relations. 8. Deficits in outside-the-box creative problem-solving. 9. Increased susceptibility to the framing effect. 10. Inability to grapple with dissenting or nuanced analysis. Subsequent dependence on thought-terminating cliches, e.g., it is what it is, to minimize cognitive dissonance. 11. Deficits in ability to form a broad contextual awareness of cultural trends, fads, and expectations, e.g., sports, fashion, consumerism, and subsequent increased susceptibility to cultural, economic, and political coercion and control. Put into these terms, and based on my own experience, I refuse to think that neurodiversity is a disorder. If anything, neurotypicality might be the disorder. If you analyze the history of geniuses that gave mankind everything, they were all, or almost all, neurodiverse. Galileo, Newton, Faraday, Maxwell, Einstein, Ayn Rand, these people were clearly autistic. So the appearance of a disorder comes from the fact that most people are understimulated and have to add artificial bells and whistles to even grab most people's attentions, and the people with the ability to sense reality in full are left over-processing useless information. On top of that, the fact that neurotypical people prefer smoothness over clarity, and therefore tend to have white lies, a concept which is foreign to most autistic people. Honesty is the best policy. That expression was definitely written by an autistic dude. So back to the original question. First, I want to address one part of the question, which goes as follows. Your Patreon article, The Solution to the Problem of Gender, is talking about a conceptual problem. And these people self-profess that their brains do not function to the degree that they want it to without pharmaceutical interventions. End quote. First, I did not then, nor do I now hold that conceptual problems, like one's definition of gender, and that causing them to not have their brains function properly, being the same as a neurological or psychological disorder or disease. These are different levels of brain quote-unquote malfunctions. Second, the people he made reference to may have conceptual problems, but I would argue that I do not, and I also struggle to have my brain function to the degree that I want. And in fact, who cannot say that? Is it not universally true that anyone can wish their brain was better at doing certain tasks? To the other questions. 1. What are the odds an internet personality will discover that they have ADHD? Honestly, it's probably very high. Normal people don't tend to set up a camera and microphone to talk about their favorite TV shows and movies, or about their favorite philosophy. The fact of the matter is that normal people are easily shamed from doing the things they love, a concept that neurodiverse people have a harder time with, and losing a friend over your love of something is way too common with NPC friends. So we can make YouTube channels and not delete them, because we don't care what you think of us. This also makes our channels the best, as we do what we love and not what the consumer wants. What are the odds that they then abuse stimulants? That depends on the individual. I do not take any. Would they help me make more videos? Maybe. Would they help me not lose friends? Maybe. Would they make me a shell of my former self? For me, yes. I choose not to because of how I react to drugs, but to each their own. Also, taking stimulants is not necessarily abuse. I would hope that they are not abusing them, and I hope no one watching is or ever will abuse them. 3. Did popularity give them ADHD? No. They are popular because they learn to drop the mask and were themselves. People love that. So why does it look like a trend? Because of how exposure to facts and knowledge work. As more and more autistic people realize that they are not weird horses, but rather perfectly fine zebras in a horse's world, suddenly they realize that this life experience of theirs has a name and methods of dealing with such issues, and having a group of people to relate to. I'm working on a full neuroscience-based video on neurodiversity, which will drop after I finish my relativity series, which is itself a lot of work, and due to a lack of funding and my ADHD/autism issues, might take longer than I expect, as per usual. There you have it, an answer to a viewer question and an explanation as to why it takes me forever to produce videos. This video is possible thanks to contributions to the Existence University Patreon by viewers like you. Thank you.